So here we are. We're here to talk culture of safety. And if those of you that attended the SABOT session heard from Chris Stevens a little bit about culture of safety and a lot about SAR cases and mishap reporting. So I'm not going to be talking about any of that, but let's just talk about the concept, why it's important, and what we can do about it. So I'd like to just start by welcoming you, telling you that according to some high person in District 9CR, I am your coordinator for culture of safety. I think that that's because the true auxiliary beginnings for culture of safety began back when I was Commodore here, and we actually had an auxiliary boat, a LIDE, which was a new term to me. It's called an elision with a bridge. And that got the whole thing going. And back then, we started by trying to define culture of safety, define why it was important to us, and we had a lot of good conversation. So, but we did end up with the notion that the culture of safety involves everybody in the auxiliary, whether you're on the water, in the air, or doing RBS, or culinary assistance, or any one of the missions that we do. So before we start, I'd like to have you take out a piece of paper and write down one mishap that you have seen or been involved in and set it aside. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Just think about something you've seen that you think is a mishap.
Commodore, I believe we have everybody transferred from our workshop now.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, let's go on. So why do we have a culture of safety, or what's called a safety culture? You'll notice that I grabbed some pictures to make this a little more interesting. I would hate to own that boat myself. So why? It's to reduce mishaps, accidents, injuries, harm, hurt, or pain, and to make us safer, and to improve readiness and availability. As we know, the Coast Guard Auxiliary is collectively embracing an enhanced safety culture, and one of the reasons is, as Commodore Villeneuve mentioned several times in the last 24 hours, that we may be called on more versus less by our active duty partners to be involved in a variety of missions. So be thinking about that as we move forward. So we define safety as the quality of averting or not causing hurt, injury, harm, danger, or loss. Okay, we always talk, there's lots of talk about safety. What do we do to keep ourselves safe? Culture, on the other hand, encompasses our social behavior, our attitudes, and our norms. Basically, it's the way we do things around here. And culture goes to the culture of flotillas and how they run their meetings, the culture of mission areas, the culture of our operations folks. It's across the board. And one of the things, an example I would like to give, and I've given before, is it goes beyond the formal stuff that we do as auxiliarists. Not too many years ago, I was traveling from my home in Nisswa, Minnesota, which is right in the center of the state, to Duluth. It was in the fall, and I started thinking about safety. What time am I going to leave? How dark is it going to be? Where will the deer be? What other animals might I encounter on my 125-mile-an-hour trip from my home to Duluth. And I started thinking about, all right, what am I going to have to do to alleviate some of those risks? Drive more slowly, leave more early, make sure that my lights were operational, take somebody with me in case something did happen, and so forth. So adopting a safety culture is something that is incredibly important to us in our non-auxiliary lives and our auxiliary lives, because we need to incorporate that culture, that way of thinking, into our actions, attitudes, beliefs, customs, habits, values, in everything we do. Culture is the way we do things around here. A culture of safety is how we look at safety when we think about the way we do things around here. So here's what it looks like. Look at the screen and, without saying anything, tell me where you think we are on the culture ladder. I love that first identifier, pathological. Who cares as long as we don't get caught? Reactive. We do a lot every time we have an accident, but in between times, Calculative. We have a system in place to manage all of our hazards. Yep, we have a system. So be it. Proactive. We work on the problems that we still find, and we look for those problems. And then, of course, at the top of the ladder, generative. Safety is how we do business around here. I can tell you that the active duty considers themselves to be generative. They talk safety all the time. Do we? I hope so. I hope that those pre-briefs we do before going on missions, whether it's an RBS mission where we're going to take a bunch of people to the dock before opening a fishing to do vessel exams, or whether we're going out on the water, up in the air, or doing a public affairs booth. Do we talk about safety? Do we look for safety? Do we think about the cords in the front of the room? I hope so. Because if we're doing that, we are moving toward that. Safety is how we do business around here. We're going to look at this slide again. Anybody care to offer a comment on where you think we are as an auxiliary?
Kamara, this is Nat. I think we're all over the board, depending on who we're dealing with.
Meaning,
we've got some people that have been around for a long time that are down at the bottom, probably up to reactive. To those of us like you and I that are up to the generative. I think we're all over the place. I think we are making improvement with trainings like this and continually discussing and sharing.
thank you, Nat. Just so you all know, Nat is in my division. We do a lot of things together, and I know exactly who she's talking about. Okay. Paul.
Yeah, I would say kind of similar to what Nat said. I would say that it kind of varies based on the activity. For example, I would say surface ops, we're very much generative. But say PA events, maybe not so much. So it may vary within various functions within the auxiliary.
Tom.
Yes, I happen to know of a certain person that's not on the younger end of the scale that has been preaching safety at PA events and vessel safety checks at marinas or at launch ramps for quite a few years, and saying that should be considered. And a lot of times, if it's a in-person session, it looks like that the person presenting is seeing a bunch of like a deer in the headlight, or like the person has horns on his head. So that's going to be down somewhere to reactive. But the message, in my opinion, is just not getting out that we should be doing pre-briefs before we do vessel safety checks at a marina or a launch ramp. I mean, God forbid if somebody walked out of a car that was going down through the center lane between where people are doing vessels or getting their boats ready, and all of a sudden that person just collected a front fender in their posterior, which is probably not very pleasant.
Thank you, Tom. You're speaking my language. Garrison.
I've got to say that I agree with Nat in general terms, but I think if I had to give the organization a single grade, we're somewhere down around proactive. We still have a lot of folks who, we always did it that way. What's the difference? Just hop in the car and go. We don't care that it's snowing today. No biggie. But we have other people who are in fact very generative. So it's very much a one-on-one kind of thing. But I think overall, I'd have to say that we're proactive and we're getting too generative.
I like to hear that. I'd like to hear that. Nat, you're up again.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I forgot to put my hand down. Tom, do you still have a question?
No, I've up my hand too.
Oh, you guys in your hands. I can't believe it.
I
I have
know.
one hand left. That's Garrison.
Nope. I just shut mine down.
Okay. So looking at the ladder, I think we can agree. Some of us are great at this. And I also think it depends on the situation. I tend to be much more safety conscious in some situations than I am in others. I like to think, I think about it all the time, but I know I don't. On that trip from Texas to Minnesota, there's a whole lot of prairie between here and there, and I come across a whole lot of people driving 85, 90 miles an hour on those roads. And I have to think, my only defense is to keep my eyes open and hope for the best. Because unfortunately, we're also dealing with other people's lack of concern for safety, and those pathological people who are driving at 80 miles an hour or 5 over. I always like that guy. My neighbor down here, he's got a new vehicle and he's upset about it because his automatic business that it drives itself won't go over 85. And we have highways in Texas that 85 is the speed limit. It's like you can't get 5 over. Oh my goodness. Okay, great discussion. So how do we get to the point where safety is what we do? And I think it's you guys fell into my trap. We have some people who buy into it, who are at the top of the scale, and some people who are slipping around toward those bottom two. So how do we create this safety culture among our peers in the auxiliary? I think we have to talk about safety before and during every mission, as we've said. Tom, and I think Tom said it. Whether it's PA or at the boat ramp or on the water or in the air, if we start talking about it, hopefully others will listen and join in. Another strategy is if you see something, say something. Don't let the fact that and this is in our risk management TCT. Don't let the fact that somebody who has stripes or stars on their shoulder is making a mistake. Say something. Share your concern. Do it obviously respectfully, but share that concern. Encourage others to come along. I think many of us in the surface area got pushback when we started doing the pre-briefs. I know I did. It's like, why do we have to do this? We've never done this before. We know what we're doing. We're experienced. And I have a feeling others have experienced that as well. Hopefully, I'm not the lone person who dealt with people who gave me pushback. Be honest. If there's an issue in the debrief, talk about it. On point, when it's happening, talk about it. Don't be intimidated, be honest. Also, as we've talked about before, adopt that culture on every mission and every type of mission. Any comments here? You guys are great. Okay. So let's talk about a just culture. And I've got my favorite story to tell here. A just culture is step one to healthy safety thinking, to a safety culture. What it means is it's okay to report and discuss mishaps and mistakes without concern for retribution, reprisal, penalty, punishment, or by your peers' judgment. The fact that we are human and we all make mistakes means we need to encourage our peers, not be judgmental of them. I can't believe he did that. Did you see that? Oh my gosh. How could anybody be that stupid? We need to stop that. And in Commodore Bob Schaefer's terms, if you mess up, fess up. We can all learn from it. At Sabat earlier today, Chris made the point. We learn from our mistakes. And I think it's essential that we share so that others can learn from those mistakes too. So we talked about mishaps this morning, but we didn't talk about near misses. A near miss is something that happens that could have become a mishap, but didn't. Maybe by chance, maybe we were just lucky, maybe something intervened. These events can also be called close calls, near hits, near accidents, but they all describe a narrowly avoided accident, also known as a mishap. My quick definition of a mishap is any unplanned, unexpected, unintentional event. We talked about that this morning, so I'm not going to push it. But when we think about a boat collision or a bridge elision, we know that's a mishap. However, there are less obvious events, such as slips and falls. That person on Chris's boat that misjudged the distance between the boat and the dock and maybe got off kilter because she was carrying her bag. Okay, back to your piece of paper. Was it a mishap or was it a near miss? Who would like to share? Kirk, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I was out with Chris Stevens, and we were doing towing exercises between our two facilities. We had a member who had someone right next to him talking to them and making sure that they were ready, but would not toss the line to the other boat until they were given the command. He said we would cross the T. We came alongside of the boat, and the person threw the line over to the other boat. It was wrapped around it. The coxswain was not aware of who was driving at the time was not aware of this thing happening, and we almost would have destroyed both boats and had some damage or some people hurt. And luckily, someone caught it on Chris's boat and tossed the line back over and untangled it, but it was very close.
So, Kirk, mishap or near miss?
I'd say it was a near miss, but too close.
Fair enough. And here's the thing. My mission here today is to share that near misses should also be shared. Maybe not necessarily up the chain, but certainly among our members. And is there a way for us to share these near misses and help our membership out? So that's a mission I think we can think about. Who else do we have?
We've got Stephen Fletcher.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Yes, Commodore. Mine was an actual Class D mishap. I sustained an injury that required medical treatment and stitches. We ended up terminating a patrol, returning to the docks. We even solicited the assistance of Chris Stevens, who was just getting underway on a patrol, to make sure we made it to our dock safely. Yep, that was definitely a mishap.
That definitely was. I believe I knew about that. You were on a sailboat, and there was no damage to the boat, but there was certainly damage to you.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So, there again, it's a mishap. Whenever people are injured, that's, I guess, maybe kind of a no-brainer. Not that I'm calling yours a no-brainer, Stephen, but okay, let's have another one.
Steve Daniel.
Sure, thank you. I had a situation when I kept my boat in the marina one time and one year, and the only docks were in these corners, and there was 3 docks, if you can imagine, a little triangle and one in the middle and everything. And when we're coming in to dock, my boat is very light in the wind. It's a Crestliner aluminum, so it's like a feather on the water. And I needed somebody in the stern area, one of the crew, to take a line and try to grab the cleat at the end of the dock as we came in and secure it so that I could pull the bow of the boat into the dock and everything would be hunky-dory. They missed the cleat, and the boat ended up getting a little bit sideways in that space, but there was no other boats around, and we just ended up floating over to the other dock and got off over there. And instead of the one that I was supposed to be on, this other one was a little shorter, but at least we made it work, and we walked the lines around and secured the boat properly. But, I've since gone through that before we depart, whether we're going back into a boat ramp dock or something, on how to secure how to catch that cleat at the end of the dock as we come in, so that I can use the motor to power the boat in if we have a good fastening in that. Usually we have the loop end on my cleat on the boat, and then we're just going around the dock cleat, and that's all they have to do is just throw the loop over and pull it back, and that'll pull the stern in, and then I can use the motor to pull the bow in, and we can get that line on.
Okay, so mishap or near miss?
Well, it was kind of a mishap near miss, because we did float into the other dock and were able to find another way to get off the boat and take it back over. But it was embarrassing as the coxswain. It was not a good thing.
Embarrassment is, we're I get it. Okay, Tom Cubett, you've been asked, had your hand up.
Yes. While on patrol at night, at 10 o'clock at night, we were coming back, approaching the Route 2 bridge, and we found a submerged object. We hit it.
What was it?
It was a log about 6 to 8 inches in diameter, about 10 feet long.
Damage?
None. I scuffed the paint. We didn't know. Let me back up. We're checking ATONs. I purposely went down this track line to make sure there was nothing there to hit, because this area in the bay likes to collect logs. And we checked the position of the lights, checked position of some unlit aids, came back, waited for lights to come on, checked those, and started back towards the bridge. And evidently I was not quite on my track line, and I found this log that was not there when we went through in the daylight.
And it could have moved. Logs do that.
It could have.
So what do you think, Tom? Mishap or near miss?
Definitely a mishap.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was injured, thankfully. Pulled the boat out of the water the next day, And the only thing we did was scuff the paint on the lower unit of the outboard.
Okay.
Did not damage the prop. Fortunately, we're going about 8 knots.
Crazy. Good. Very good.
So
Okay,
as a result of that, this year when I have to do those same ATONs, I'm going to go down towards the ones that aren't lit, get their positions, go to the ones that are lit, and just make sure that they're not going to move because they're permanently fixed, but make sure they're not covered up with things. Go back to the ones that aren't lit and sit there and get the light characteristics from there, and then go back. And it's a much safer route.
Good planning. Thank you, Tom. Nat, did you have something again?
Oh, yeah, I have a incident to share. I touched on this a little bit in the SABOT when we were talking about pre-brief. So we're out on a patrol, and we have 4 people on board. One is on the aft deck. I'm on the sideways seat behind the navigator, coxswain at the helm, and navigator in the port side seat. Coxswain said, "Coming up," and hit the throttle. And this is a boat with a lot of power, and it comes up right now. The crew member on the aft deck, half of him kind of went flying. He had a good hold on. He did not go overboard. I went sliding across the sideways seat, hit the bulkhead, and then I noticed a fire extinguisher was rolling around on the deck.
Ooh.
This was a near miss, a very near miss to a man overboard, potential injury with people sliding all over the place, and a fire extinguisher rolling around that had not been mounted properly, and it came loose. So I regret to this day that we didn't report this near miss. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that whole patrol in private, but definitely a near miss. And what we addressed in the SABOT was that helmsman needs to make sure they get an answer from everyone on the boat before they hit that throttle when they're coming up or coming down.
And that is a very common mistake that I see, and I'll bet other QEs in the room here see. I was thrown back. The coxswain brought the boat up, and it's like, whoa! I ended up in the back. Could have gone over the top of over the engine, I suppose, but didn't. That's a really good point.
Yeah, well,
So-
and we hear those stories in our workshops, in our TCT training all the time, so we gotta hammer it home.
Well, I agree, and that's part of the culture of safety. So I want to tell my story. 3 of us were coming in on a very, very windy day. I was the coxswain. This was years and years ago. So I was the coxswain. I had a helmsman, also a coxswain, and a third member. So there were 3 of us on our small boat, also a coxswain, coming in, and we set up. The helmsman and I agreed on how this was going to work. The third individual was going to tie up the stern. I was going to hop off and tie up the bow, and we were just going to be blown right into the dock. It was all planned. We got there. I saw the person on the back of the boat throwing off the line for the stern. We came within 6 inches of the dock. I stepped off, and the helmsman reversed.
Ouch.
I ended up making a decision. Except it was like very windy, and this boat was under power. I had to jump in the water or break my leg and jump back out onto the dock. And here's where it gets interesting. This was definitely a mishap. It did not get reported. To my embarrassment, to my learning, it did not get reported because no one was hurt. Okay. The member driving the boat, the helmsman, also a coxswain, knew he had made a mistake, begged me not to turn it in, and I allowed peer pressure to influence me to say, well, nobody got hurt. I guess we don't have to send it up the chain. So I'm sharing that because it's human nature. Now that particular member quit the auxiliary, never went out on a boat again, and ended up quitting the auxiliary because he was embarrassed. I allowed peer pressure to affect my good judgment on turning this in as a mishap. It was definitely a mishap. I ended up in the water. It happens. We need to fight this. And that's the reason I'm sharing it. I mean, it's clearly, I'm in a position of leadership, wasn't then, but am now. And I want to share that because I think I've got excellent judgment. I think I'm a good coxswain. I'm a QE. I learned tremendously from that experience. But I let the situation keep me from reporting it. And I rue that to this day. So we talked about it this morning. What should you do? Chris went through it. If you have a mishap or even a serious near miss, in my opinion, we should report to the active duty immediately, and they should send it up their side. We should report to our FSOIS, who should report it up to Tom, the DSOIS, and our flotilla commander. I will never forget having a conversation with National Auxiliary National Commodore Alex Molesky, who shared at lunch one day how embarrassed he was to have an active duty member ask him about an Auxair. Actually, it's about having one of his pilots have an accident. And interestingly enough, everybody knew about it except the National Commodore. It was not an auxiliary accident or mishap. The guy wasn't flying for the auxiliary, but he was flying, and he was an auxiliary pilot. So, and certainly not in 9th Central. But that kind of tells us knowledge is power. And the NACO said he couldn't have been more embarrassed to have active duty know about something that had happened that he didn't know. So very important to notify everybody. So now we're back here. And this is sort of the end of the road. And maybe it's not the end of the road, but it's the beginning of the road. Think about the members in your flotilla and what they're doing, and take ownership of the culture of safety in your unit. Share what you know, share your ideas, help people who are down in that pathological reactive area to grow. And I think the organization will take giant steps toward really having a strong culture of safety. That's all I have for you. Who has something for me? Anybody with their hand up?
Oh, just me, Nat, again. I'd like to keep that slide. I didn't make a screenshot of it. I think we need to have this conversation at every flotilla meeting, at every division meeting. I think we need examples of mishaps and near misses that have been reported without disciplinary action. Some of those
Right.
people, only if we get caught, they're afraid of the consequences. They'll lose their qual, or they'll whatever, an investigation, and that's scary for some people. And I'm wondering if we can come up with a system for anonymous near miss reporting.
Well, there's an idea that we can share with Commodore Schaefer, who leads this culture of safety program for the auxiliary. And what we're talking about is going back to that just culture. The auxiliary has committed to not retribution, to not having retribution for mistakes that are made. And I think that's a huge step forward for us that we need to promote. Thanks, Nat. I saw a couple more people. Who else do we have?
Charles Palmer, Commodore Villeneuve, and Chris Stevens all have their hand up.
Well, let's go in that order. Mr. Palmer. You with me?
I just wanted to chime in and say thanks and great presentation and echo what you mentioned about from the active duty side. As a TCT risk management facilitator at the sector, another one of the hats that I wear, along with being lucky enough to be the AUX liaison at Sector Northern Great Lakes. This is a big thing, definitely from Captain Bendel here at our sector, other captains, leadership all the way up, and that safety culture. What a great example that was shared about someone so afraid to report it as a mishap because they were embarrassed, thought they were getting in trouble. And that really keys in on what's so important with safety culture and that just culture. I mean, we've got a lot of leadership on this meeting here. And it's a tricky thing because as soon as something goes wrong, you think, oh, I'm going to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And to try and separate that from safety. Safety should just be about how we can prevent that from happening again, keep our people safe, keep property from getting damaged. It's just so important to separate that from, as you put it so well, retribution or getting in trouble. So I just wanted to echo that. Thanks for letting me chime in for a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer, for being here. We are delighted to have your input. I really appreciate it. So thank you again. Okay, Commodore Villeneuve.
Hi, Sue. I'm
Hey.
going to offer some observations, and I'm going to key in on something that you mentioned, and that is the human nature to take the step back and say, I'm not going to report or I'm not going to say anything because either I'm not in a leadership position or they have more positions or stripes than I do. And I think we need to empower each other to look beyond that. Even if you're going to talk to me about something I may not be doing well that can create a safety issue, we need to encourage our fellow auxiliaries to then have those conversations. We talk often about any auxiliarist on a boat crew, for example, can terminate the mission. It should be equally the same that any auxiliarist, it shouldn't matter your position in the organization or your training level, can speak up about safety issues. And I think if we do that, then we can facilitate the reporting so that we can create the training behind getting better. I would offer that we are all leaders at various times in the organization, whether we hold that appointed or elected position or not. And I think that we should owe it to our fellow auxiliaries that we will lead on their behalf so that we can keep them safe, and hopefully they'll do the same and keep me safe.
I hear you. Thank you, sir. Are you finished?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Fran, I think you had your hand up. Fran, formerly from Florida, now from Canton. Are you there? Tom, you have your hand up, I think, or not?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Fran.
Okay.
Now we can't. Are you there, Fran?
You're not hearing me?
We weren't. Now we are again.
Okay. So for about the last 20 years, nursing has used the same idea that you're talking about. If something goes wrong, let's talk about it, let's work through it. And they're not just firing nurses every time something goes crazy. And what has happened is now people are so much more.
Oh, we lost you again. Fran? Well, she's coming back on. Fran is a new transfer from Florida up to Michigan, and we are delighted to have her. I think she's having microphone problems. Chris, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, Commodore. First of all, thank you for an excellent presentation, and thank you for putting a full wrap on our whole SABOT program that just really integrates the culture of safety. What I wanted to share came from a brief meeting that I had down at Sector Detroit, that the active duty is also very engaged in this. It is part of the brief, and they actually go over mishaps that happened in at the sector each week, and use a similar formula that you came up with and similar slides to show and stress the importance of this culture. And I just wanted to thank the 23, 24 people that were on this call who have just become disciples of the culture of safety, and to move that forward, not only in our auxiliary lives, but our personal lives. Thank you so much, Commodore.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I think about what you just said, that sector meets on a regular basis to talk about things that happen. I wonder if, as a part of our culture of safety in Ninth Central, we might not be able to implement something like that. I don't know. At the beginning of the season, mid-season, and end of season, since we have a limited season up here, to share, because I think sharing is so powerful. And if we can do that, Tom, if we can and Chris, if we can start setting something up where people can share in a just culture, no one is going to make fun of them, be judgmental. This happened. Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it. And be allowed to share in a safe environment. That might be a great way to implement the culture of safety, whether it's operational or a PA event or an RBS event. I really like that idea. Thanks, Chris.
Quite welcome, Commodore. Great job.
Okay, I think we're ready to do a wrap. I want to thank the people who are here, who spent this time with me. As you can tell, it's really an area of passion for me, and I know we can do great work in the area of culture of safety. Thank you again, and have a great evening.